Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for November 1st, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher, moderating and sharing my screen. And also present are Aaron McHale, Offer Schall, Ralph Kohler, and Simo Helston. Thanks all for coming. So some time ago, we were looking at a bunch of related issues related to the process of creating a field. So maybe just for the sake of the recording, um, I'll briefly show what we're talking about. This is a site with the Umami demo profile installed. And if you want to add a new field, um, it's this sort of workflow that we're talking about. Adding a reference field is a two-step process. And you have to decide whether you're going to reference content or users or something else, typically content. So this whole workflow is what we're talking about. Oh, and I see Thomas Howell has just joined us. So Thomas, we're going to talk about this issue, which is 3409379. Move the first two steps of field creation into a modal. And the idea is that those first two steps of the process should be in a modal window. And maybe it's worth talking about why we want to do this. Why are modals considered better? So again, going back here. Oh, so um, so on the issue, the first step would show up in a modal rather than in a separate page load. So, I mean, some other parts of field management were um, put into modals. And for some reason, this wasn't. So what has been put into modal? Is it when you edit an existing field?
The reuse of an existing field is in a modal.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's what it
the
is.
one right next to creating.
Right. So this was totally reworked like a year or two ago for Drupal 10.1 maybe. Um, and it is sort of inconsistent that we have these two buttons right next to each other, and one of them brings up a modal, and one of them causes a page load. Anyone have general opinions on modals? Is it a good thing to have? Advantages, disadvantages? Go ahead, Ralph.
The advantage, one advantage is definitely the one actually, the other issue I've linked with because at the moment you have several sort of disconnected single pages, and the H1 is not really helpful. And by going with a wizard-like experience with steps, you have basically more situational awareness where you are in the process and what the actual step is actually about. And so for screen readers in particular, that's helpful. And for people with a short working memory, a small working memory.
So I guess it's a question of once you're in the middle of this process, if you decide to short circuit it, how do you get back to where you were? Um, is
And
that
actually knowing in which process you actually are. Have I, for example, clicked number, for example, or reference or whatever? So being aware of the context, the overall you're currently in. If
okay?
you got distracted, for example.
Thomas, what do you want to say?
I'm struggling to understand what the negative to the modal is. So if anyone can elucidate that, it would be great. Um, I mean, I was trying to think of something like the URL maybe is helpful if you wanted to link directly, but I can't imagine why I'd ever want to do that personally. And I think that the modal seems superior. So if anyone can help me understand why modal might not be used, or is it just is this an artifact of an incomplete transition for the entire process for everything related to fields?
Here, I think it's unfinished process. But in general, I think in the past, people have avoided modals with jQuery because there have been some implementations that weren't as accessible as versions without modals. So it's just less work not to use modal than to make modal accessible. So I think that has been one of the reasonings before. And also there was a delay, I think, because at one point there was a plan to redo Drupal models in some way so that it would be a big change, so that all the models would work the same way in a new way or something like that. So then it was maybe postponed, but then the change didn't happen or happened and wasn't continued.
Could I quickly add to Simo's point?
Sure.
Sorry, that I step in, but just want to stay in context. Just one word about the modal state. In 10.3, jQuery 1.14 got released. That added basically the ability to add an area modal attribute. So for screen readers, the background of the modal is getting excluded from the accessibility object model that I've added there. And in 1.14.1 that got released yesterday or the day before, another patch got in that adds the option at the moment, because that was the one problem with dialog modals, and at the short-term fix that ARIA modal got added. And the other problem is basically at the moment the title is wrapped in a span that is semantically incorrect, and 1.14.1 that has to get added to Drupal core still added the option that you are able to set basically the heading level for the wrapping one. And my suggestion on the issue is basically to set it to an H1, but there's discussion an H2 would be also okay-ish, but the overall direction is an H1. And in regards of the initiative to moving away from jQuery, there is the native dialog modal element, but that is sort of slow because it requires several steps to include into core. But there is a channel in the Drupal Slack dialog_native. Yeah, so sorry for the interruption.
Okay, so I think a summary of all that is that there are accessibility issues with using modals, and a lot of progress has been made and is still being made as we upgrade the version of jQuery we include with Drupal. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
that would be fix the last one. And yes, the jQuery stepped away from the idea of replacing a div with a dialog element. That would be a breaking change in regards of maintenance, and therefore they were reluctant. And the ARIA modal attribute adding that was a compromise, and it's totally fine. that way.
Okay, and Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of the things that Alpha mentioned. I think also the models we have, they do, I believe I tested it a while ago, I can't remember, but like when I tested it, but they do tend to like capture the tab order. So you sort of tab within them, I think, if I remember correctly. So even, you know, there's not really if you're navigating using the keyboard, you are constrained to the model itself. So I don't think that's there's not a huge accessibility issue in that way. But as Ralph noted, there's, you know, some improvements around ARIA and things, and obviously moving to native dialogues. Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, I think also like more broader from a user experience perspective, I think it provides a better experience because it feels like like a snappier experience, and we're not reloading the whole page. We're just presenting a dialogue on the screen. It feels definitely anytime you substitute a modal in for where rather than a full page load. I think it'll speed up the interface. It'll makes it feel more modern, I think. So definitely there'll be some improvements there. The only thing we don't have, I suppose, and this is the same. This is no. So what I'm about to say, to be clear, is moving this stuff to a model doesn't change this problem, but we don't really have a good multi-step flow pattern in Drupal. The installer is the only place that really has one, but there's a lot of places that might benefit from a sort of multi-step flow to help you better, as some of the things Ralph said, to help you better orient where you are. And so that's potentially something in the future that could be introduced, but I don't think that should block moving this to a model. I'm very pro moving this to a model.
Okay, and a few things in the chat. So Ralph mentions that this tabbing behavior that you mentioned and that I illustrated is the behavior for ARIA modal or dialogue modal. And Offer gives a thumbs up to what you were saying, Aaron, and also mentions that the dialogue element works really well. And I think there's also a critical issue to start using the dialogue element, but it's been around for a while, so I guess I haven't looked at it closely, but it must not be an easy thing to implement. Okay, so I guess we're all sort of pro-modal for consistency and for not having slow page loads and for ease of navigation and knowing where you are. Modals are a good idea, and we should move ahead with this issue that this should be opening in a modal rather than a separate page load. So let's have a look at these comments. I think I was reviewing the work that was being done. And oh, the current merge request is badly broken. Was my last comment, and there hasn't been any work on it since then. So yeah, I'm inclined to ignore whatever work was previously done and sort of start from scratch. Oh, and in the chat, Ralph has found the issue for the wizard pattern or the multi-step modal. I think those are the same things. Multi-step form wizard is the issue title, and the issue number is 1886616. From 2013, it's been around for a while. So again, it's not an easy thing to do. Current status is needs work. Went some years without any comments from 2019 until the review queue bot looked at it in 2023. And I think some work was made on what was done on one of these related issues um, to add a new pattern for creating modals. Um, but I think it does less than what's needed for having a reusable multi-step modal pattern in Drupal core. Um, so I guess the proposed resolution section sort of technical. It says how to implement it, and I can't promise to look at this in the next week, but I think I can likely do it in the next month or two. Um, and Offer had to leave the meeting. And Ralph, what's this issue?
It's one of the other issues that is moving the label and machine name fields to the field config edit form. And I'm not sure if it would ease the modal issue or not. Just wanted to note.
Yeah, so I guess this is another one that I'd be willing to work on myself. Again, on the same sort of time frame. For the recording, the issue numbers 3397711. Move label and machine name fields to the field config edit form. And I think I can pretty easily demonstrate what that one is about. When we create a new field and say formatted text, um, people are constantly missing this required field, even though we've got it marked as required. It has the little asterisk. Um, so this is a clear usability problem.
Yeah, it's a good example actually of something that we observed in user testing of things we've worked on recently, where we've talked about like the priority order of elements or content, and obviously like the giant boxes there are clearly the thing that draws your attention.
Yes. And as I'm tabbing around here, I notice that it would be a lot more usable if this were in a modal and my tab order was limited to things in the modal. Um, but the idea is that we would move this label field from this form to the next step. And here the label appears again. It's already there. And there are a bunch of other elements. In most cases, there's not very much is required. I guess when we noticed when I was adding an entity reference field that there was a required field. But just this just seems like the more natural place to have the have someone enter the label. and just make this a one-step form. Oh, and I guess the other point is that if you add something like a Boolean field, where there aren't any choices, the only thing on this page is the label. And it seems like, you know, a waste of a step in the process to have to enter one thing on this stage rather than enter it as part of this form. And Aaron, what did you want to say?
Interesting because and maybe this has changed, but I have a memory that when you get to this screen, the field has already been created. And so I'm not sure if that's true, but like because it used to take you to the field storage screen when that was a separate form, and then but the field would have all been created at that point. So I'm not sure if by moving the label to this screen, do we need to change then how that works so that the field doesn't get created when you get to the form here? It gets created after you save the form? Or maybe I'm misremembering this?
Yeah, I think you're right. I consider that an implementation detail that we have the luxury of ignoring during usability meeting.
Right. Well, I think it's the reason I bring it up is because I wonder if because obviously that would increase complexity. So I wonder if one option would be to just have, as you saw there, if we move this to a modal, having another step that is just about entering like the label and maybe like the help text or something. If that is then okay to just have that as a separate step in the process, and then maybe look at, you know, like seeing if you know if because if it becomes technically too, you know, too challenging to change how at what point the field gets created, then maybe that would be a compromise. So that's kind of why I brought it up.
So in this case where I suggested that it's kind of silly to have a form for just the label, you would add the help text to this form. And then we'd have two things to enter here, one of which is required and one of which is optional.
Yeah, I'm just proposing it because, as I said, if at this point, if it becomes like too challenging to change at what point the field is created, because if we move the label field to the form, then the field can't be created before you get to that form. So this may be keeping this on its, basically introducing this as a separate step, may be a compromise solution that's still okay, and still achieves the purpose of, you know, not overcomplicating the previous form where you select the you know, widget that you want or whatever. But also like at the same time trying to think of a way to make that more useful by saying, okay, maybe we add the help text as well to that form. So yeah, I don't know, but it might be better. Again, this is maybe why doing the modal issue first is better, because having extra steps in a modal feels a lot less wasteful than actually whole separate forms that reload the page every time you go through the submit button.
I think,
And
yeah.
Ralph's suggestion was that it might be better to do them in the other order and first implement the
No, not necessarily. I just raised the other issue to bring it in the awareness if it has an advantage to do the other thing first. I have not the technical expertise to decide. I just wanted to draw the attention.
right. You're raising the question, not making a recommendation.
Exactly.
Yes. Simo, you're muted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I definitely would want to have the name of the field on the configuration page, because it also helps some people, I think, to look at the the kind of if you first have to decide the name then it's for some people it might be a little bit more difficult than when you can do it like choose your own like the settings, and then if somebody wants to give it a name, something like a text field of 255 characters, and then thinks in the configuration, oh, I only want to put it have 160. So this is a kind of a bit silly example, but I think it would be useful to have it in the same place and not have additional page. Also, especially for the description, you should be able to see how it's configured, because for the description, you need to be able to describe the settings.
So let's walk me through what you're talking about. Should we start with formatted text?
Yeah, it's just about the label. So I think it should be on the configuration form.
So I'm not sure what you mean by the configuration form. So walk me through.
Yeah.
I start here and submit this form.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're suggesting that we do or do not have the label here.
Because yeah, it gets forgotten. So now just choose the type and then go to the next page, and then to have everything that needs to be written. So also because I think in the future these choices could be so that you can just click them and then continue. So that could be also an option to have those as kind of a buttons where you click and then you continue.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is that you agree with this issue, that this label is required here, but it should be removed from this form, and then we enter it on this form.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's right.
yeah, that's exactly what this issue is saying. To move the label and the machine name fields, the machine name is sort of hidden. But I guess on this page, if you want to change it, you have to click there. Um, so Thomas, go ahead.
I think for me, this issue, this most recent issue we're looking at, reemphasizes the value in moving to the modals sooner rather than later, because it minimizes kind of the pain of these being separate URLs. And then what Zemo suggested, or maybe it's from the issue itself, but having, if you select a particular thing that acts as the button, like I think that once it's in the modal, we can look at additional improvements that would make it even smoother. And it makes it even more modal-like less, fewer clicks, making the process like I looking at this now, it doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me that clicking on text doesn't just take you to the next thing. Like you can go back and reselect this, but you have three choices, you pick one and it should automatically kind of move you to the next thing within the context of a modal. But to me, that's a future change, future improvement. Moving all of this into a modal makes it less impactful. And then that other issue of moving label and machine readable name onto the next page, like all of those things can change to continue to improve it. But all of this for me makes the modal switch even more pressing because it helps with multiple issues simultaneously, making them smoother and more consistent.
Okay, and you got a thumbs up from Ralph there, and yes, definitely um, a next step once the label is no longer on this form. Instead of select and submit the form, we could make it a one-step process, make this a button rather than um, whatever it is now. I, I forget what it is. Let's have a look. Is this a select list?
Radio button.
It's a radio button. Yes, type radio. Here it is. Here's the actual input. So it's rather complicated styling for a radio button, but that's what it actually is. So again, I may not get to it until I have a week off at the end of the year, but I will look at these two issues, and I'll have to consider both usability and technically what it seems to make sense to do first. And I'll see if I can make some progress on this. I think, a lot of work was done on this. I guess I think it was for Drupal 10.1, which was released about a year and a half ago, right? Where we're next month we're going to have Drupal 10.4 released. So, and Ralph confirms it was 10.1. So it would be nice to, if not finish that project, at least make some additional progress on it. So we have almost 15 minutes left for the meeting. I don't know, is there anything more to be said about those related issues? Should we continue the discussion from last time about, I guess it was, the text we see here? Or should we look at one of the other issues on the on the issue for today's meeting? Go ahead, Ralph.
One suggestion that is touching a topic we've discussed last week, or one aspect, and that I found in one of the other issues, and it would be maybe, I guess, because continuing the discussion from last week is might be too lengthy for 15 minutes, but that one is in comment number 6 in the link I've posted. It's about the pattern used for the title of the modal, and that we might discuss. I've posted a suggestion there. Stephen.
Okay, so
in
this
line with
is issue 3397715. It's one of the related issues we were already looking at, and you want to look at your comment number 6.
Yeah.
So maybe let's first look at these screenshots. So I guess the issue is adding these headers. So step 1 of 2, add field, and step 2 of 2, my field settings. And why don't you summarize your comment, Ralph?
Yeah, it was basically just a bit more granular, and distinguished between basically the different steps, because in the screenshots those were only 2 steps and excluded or they combined, if I remember correctly, the first 2 steps, and in my suggestion I simply distinguish between the different steps, and also distinguish between the different types, because some field types have no options and some types have options, and therefore one group of fields have 3 steps while the other only have 2. And yeah, that's the suggestion I've came up with.
So yes, we'd certainly have to be accurate if it's a two-step process or a three-step process. We'd have to know that and indicate it in the screenshot. So again, switching back to here, if I create new field, that's step one. If I choose Boolean, this is going to be a two-step process. I get the label. And I guess these are the only two steps you're considering. You don't consider this as step three, or do
So
you?
I have considered it. Step 3 is basically, in that case, it would be step 3 of 3 XXX settings for article.
Okay. And then for some of them, there's an extra step, create new fields. This is step one, formatted text. This is step two. You choose which of these options. This would be step three. So I guess I,
And if you go one step back, please. If you see there, the first and the second step both have the same title, add field,
okay,
which is not specific in
right.
regards of the context.
So, I guess I'm confused. I'm seeing this as always a three-step process. What am I?
At
I
the
get,
moment, if the other issue gets in, moving the label to the field settings page, then,
okay,
for example, the Boolean has only 2 steps. At the moment,
that's
everything
right.
is 3-stepped.
That's right. If we implement the other issue, then we would skip this stage, which is
Yes.
currently step two when selecting a Boolean. Aaron?
Yeah, I like this the sort of sentiment of that. I wonder if a couple thoughts. I wonder how much of that is just sort of putting a plaster on the fact that we don't have a proper multi-step, you know, flow, I guess. And there's nothing wrong with doing this in the meantime, but it's worth thinking about. The other thing is like right now, when you get to that, let's say third step, you're actually on the edit form for that field as I mentioned earlier. So right now, the result of making that change would be that if you then go back to the field list and you click edit, the title would say step 3 of 3 or something. So we need to again think about, do we change the process so that the field gets created after you submit this form?
So I think
Or
if we look at the URL, um, it's a long URL because, oh, it has this huge destination parameter. Wow.
probably, yeah.
Okay,
A
but if
lot.
we get rid of the destination parameter, we are on add field.
Oh,
So
that's interesting. Okay, maybe I'm
in
wrong then.
in
Yeah.
some sense, it's the same form. It's two different paths, two different routes to the same form. Um, but we are actually still on the add field page, and we should be able to.
Yeah. That's even weirder than that the form field gets created before this form. You get to this form if this is actually the add field form.
Yeah,
And again, I
there's
don't know. Maybe that's changed. Like maybe because this was before. My memory of this was from before they combined the settings form into here and changed the layout.
um I don't think they fundamentally changed that. Although there was a lot of work done all at once.
You may be able to just like create a field, but then not submit the add form to see if it does create the field.
Um, All right, so let's add a Boolean do not submit. So I go to this next stage, but I don't submit this
Yeah, if you go
form.
back to the field list.
I go back to article manage fields, and the field has not been created.
Oh, okay. So that's, in a way, that's kind of a good thing, I suppose, because that then means that, again, if we keep the label, if we remove the label from step 2, let's say, then there's that becomes a lot easier to do, because in order to create the field, you have to submit the step 3, so to speak. So yeah, my previous comment from earlier, I guess, is no longer the case.
Okay, and just for comparison, let's see what happens when we reuse a field. So this takes us no longer in a modal. I think that's another related issue, that this should stay in the modal. And just, I think we're still on the add field form. Now this is the edit form. Interesting. Ah,
I've posted a link to the issue that's for the reuse. There's already an existing one as well.
right. So that's, I think that's what I was just saying, that that the ultimate goal is to have this part of the modal we were in previously. So the idea is that you start on the manage field page, you click one of these buttons, and a modal comes up until you finish the process. And when you submit the final step of the modal, you come back to this page. That's that's clearly the end goal. And part of the challenge is how to break that up into small pieces that can be finished easily, instead of dragging on for months and years. Okay, we're coming up towards the end of the hour. 3 minutes left. Any closing comments? If not, then let's just end a couple of minutes early for once. Um, Thanks all for coming. We'll do it again next week, and I hope I'll be able to find some time before the end of the year. But if not, I do have some free time in the last couple of weeks of December, and I'll try to make some progress on at least one of these issues.
Thank you very much, Benji. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Benji, and have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thanks, bye.